Enright. Duncan Enright, who is the leader for transport and the chief of flower pots in Oxford. Duncan Enright, the favourite for the blue rinses here in Oxford. And may I say, our pound shop Tony Blackburn. However, jokes aside, we have all come together today. We are not on the right or the far right. We are on the right side of history. We are on the right side of history, and we are here because we all know it's the right thing to do, to stand up together to save our rights that are under attack here in Oxford and all around the country where these 15-minute or 20-minute cities are being announced. And may I say, I'm looking round at you today. Look at how diverse we all are. We are every people here today. We are from every ethnic background. We are men, women, every sex, every gender, every nationality, and from different parts of the country. And we are putting aside all those differences, all those identities they keep pinning on us to divide us. Today, we say, no, you're not going to divide us. We stand united today and together as we peacefully protest and march here in Oxford. So we're going to have a peaceful, lawful protest today. We've got some amazing speakers lined up for you today. And I'm now going to hand over to Fiona. A round of applause for Fiona.
I'm not going to say very much, guys, but I just think everyone should give Debbie a round of applause for working really hard to organise today. Debbie's been supported by some amazing teams of people. So another round of applause for the Unite for Freedom team. We got Nacho, we got Kelly, we got Louise Creffield from Save Our Rights that have all worked together. So can we keep clapping, guys, for these people? We're also supported by British Lions for Freedom, which is an amazing outreach group. So a massive round of applause for Damon and team. I mean, just to hit the nail on the head, I think Debbie mentioned we are peaceful, we are non-partisan. We do have some agitators that have announced that they intend to agitate today. So just again to reiterate, we need to remain peaceful. We're freedom lovers. We are warriors, we are fighters, but we're the most united group in history. So give yourselves a round of applause for making today what it is. Now, getting straight into the speakers, because we've got a vast range of speakers today, trusting the real science. But first of all, there's a man who's not shy. He is quite opinionated, and I quite like him myself. He ran for London Mayor. Can everyone please make some noise for Lawrence Fox?
Hi guys, lovely to see so many of you out here today. Let's be clear, this is not about science, it's not about data, it isn't about clean air, it isn't about the environment, it's about power and control over you. Every single day we have an opportunity to further the cause of freedom and to make the world a better place than before for our children. Freedom to speak, freedom to move, freedom to transact, freedom to go where you want, freedom to travel, freedom of bodily autonomy, and every single day we should be making steps towards freedom. We have seen in these last years how quickly simple freedoms can be taken away and the catastrophic damage caused when society is dominated by the fearful. And any step we take in the other direction, we take a step towards control and tyranny and a step away from freedom. So every single day that we don't fight for our fundamental human right to be left alone to pursue our business is a betrayal of our children's future and a betrayal of freedom. And we will fight every single day towards freedom. Freedom!
Massive round of applause for Lawrence Fox of GB News. Whoops. Anyway, our next speaker, he's fairly political, he knows his politics, and he's founder of the Freedom Alliance. Please make a round of applause for Jonathan Tilt.
Hi everyone. Hi. Thanks Debbie, thanks Fiona for organising this. Incredible turnout and brilliant to see these vast numbers here today. It's slightly absurd and obscene that I'm stood here in Oxford defending our rights, your rights, to move around within the city. We're not talking about freedom of movement between nations here. We're talking within a city or a town. I don't particularly want to be here doing this today. I'd sooner be out cycling, but it's a weird and strange world that we've moved into, one where that we have to stand up and, as Lawrence was saying, defend these fundamental rights. These rights belong to us. They don't belong to the state. We haven't given freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of association, and freedom to run your own business. We haven't handed these over to the state for them to hand them back to us if we behave ourselves and comply with whatever the current absurd narrative is. Thanks. We're in a war here. We're in a war against globalist psychopaths, and let's not pretend otherwise. But it is a war that we can and we will win. If we avoid the twin perils of ego and apathy, and the speakers here today and the crowd here today suggest that we're starting to do quite well on both of those fronts. If we can avoid those twin perils, we can win this war because our enemies are panicking. And they're panicking because their current system of control, their current system of enslaving us, debt-based money, is collapsing around their ears. And that I firmly believe is why we're at where we're at. That system, the inflation that comes at the end of empires as money dies, they've created too much money, they've pushed interest rates down, trapped everybody in debt, and then the interest rates go back up and they impoverish everybody. As that system dies, we have the opportunity to move to a better system, a freer system, and a more independent system. They're trying to move us towards one of digital control. Now, this is brilliant day out. It's great that everybody's here, the numbers are here, but this has to be so much more than one day out. We desperately, desperately need you to go back to your towns, to your villages, to your counties, to your cities, and take back control in a proper and meaningful way. Not the empty slogan that was used a few years ago, but to actually take back control. We need you to start getting onto and getting into these councils to remove the Duncan Enrights of this world. We need to start to get people elected through the freedom parties, through the thing I'm running now, which is the Vote Freedom Project. But we need you all out of your comfort zones, going back and getting one or two people on each of these councils and stopping and frustrating this nonsense. And if we do that, we can win this war. I firmly believe that. We can stop the 5G rollout. We can stop their use of councils to enact whatever bit of tyranny they're planning next. And we can start to go onto the front foot and take the initiative. But that's not half a dozen people stood up here on the platform doing that. That's each and every one of you. We need thousands of people. It's 19,000 councillors in this country. We need people standing and removing those corrupt and captured councillors. And just to reiterate what Debbie said at the start, we have to remain an inclusive movement. We're across all cultures, all communities, all identities. Inclusion has been captured by the other side, but we have got to, because they are going to try, when the crisis comes, and the crisis is coming, they are going to try and get us to turn on each other, as they always do. And we really, please, 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 have got to avoid doing that. Because if we stand united, if we stand and fight for humanity, we can do this, and I genuinely believe we can win the war against digital slavery and medical tyranny. And we're still fighting the medical tyranny battle. Obviously, 15-minute cities is where it's at the minute, but the pandemic treaty is still sat there waiting to be slipped through Parliament under cover of darkness. So we have to fight on all fronts and whatever front they come at us with next. So thanks for listening, and go back to your communities and fight.
Can I just remind people as well, we do have an open mic at the end of this. We have a community event, you're going to have some music, and there is an open mic for people that want to speak and say a few words. We just want to get it on the march and make some noise through Oxford before that happens. So right at the end, we'll have the opportunity for people to come and ask some questions and speak on the topic if they want to. But next, we have a man who is an academic and a graduate of the University of Oxford. He's actually an ambassador for Bahrain and Syria, and he's been critical within the movement of the West into the Middle East. So everyone, can you please make some noise for Peter Ford?
Thank you. Yeah, my main concern has been campaigning for peace, but I've also been on the barricades during the COVID wars alongside Piers Corbyn, who I'm pleased to see is with us today. And this is part of a war as well. Oxford is one of the new battlefronts as the establishment fight against people, ordinary people, to take away our freedoms. Oxford is a new front in the war that the establishment is waging against ordinary people, taking away our freedoms. And that is the message that we're here today. It's not a seminar. You all know why you're here, but it will be interesting to hear perhaps from later speakers about some of the issues that the authorities don't want to discuss. No politician will stand up and debate the case for 15-minute cities. In fact, there's no question to which 15-minute cities are the answer. They try to make out that the issue is pollution or congestion, but congestion is a problem that basically solves itself. And pollution, well, is way, way less than it was 10, 15 years ago. The authorities try to play down the extent to which these traffic restrictions are about climate lockdowns, but that is what they really are. On the BBC, and I believe the BBC are with us today, their propagandizer-in-chief, the high priest of warmism, Justin Rowlatt. I saw him earlier, so let's give a rousing welcome to Justin Rowlatt. The BBC Newsnight programme the other night carried a feature that attempted to smear opponents of traffic restrictions in Oxford and elsewhere. Kirsty Woke, or Kirsty Walk, as she prefers to call herself, Kirsty Woke, tried to make out that it was about pollution and congestion, but then she let the cat out of the bag. She said, but we have to have these restrictions, don't we? Because we've only got 10 or 20 years. We've only got 10 or 20 years before Thermageddon. This is what it is really about, a series of microaggressions on our freedoms leading to climate lockdowns and any other restrictions that the establishment can think of. But they try to make out that we are cranks. That same Newsnight programme featured a 3-second segment of Piers Corbyn. But who is the crank here? Who is deluded? A person like Kirsty Woke, who thinks that we're 10 or 20 years away from Thermageddon, or the qualified astrophysicist, which is Piers Corbyn, who has debunked much of the junk science around warmism and who has led the campaign with his ULEZ Stop Can't Pay Won't Pay campaign in London and helped to be first and foremost in putting this issue on the national agenda. But this whole thing about 15-minute cities is a sort of cult. It has all the trappings of a cult. These people hark back to a golden age when people didn't move around very much, when villains had to have permission from the master to move about the city, when there were toll gates everywhere in medieval cities like Oxford. This was a period when people went in fear of Armageddon, only now it's Thermageddon. So today we're going to send a strong message to authority, be it national or local. And by the way, there is no choice, no political choice. Oxford County Council, governing coalition of eco-Labour, liberal autocrats, and eat your greens. Green, greener or greenest. Eco-Labour, liberal autocrats, and eat your greens. But there is no choice. What if I want brown? There is no one to represent me, no one to speak up for me, certainly not the wishy-washy Tories who are just a paler shade of green. So today we send a rousing message to them all. We are the street, we are the people, and you know what you can do with your zones. Shove your zones, shove your zones. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker, she's a very young lady and she's our Child Freedom Ambassador. Now, I want everyone to give a really, really warm welcome to Jasmine.
Hello everyone. It is wonderful to see you all here today. I know many of you have travelled a long way to be here, and I just want to thank you all for coming. And I'd like to thank the organisers for the work they have put into organising this meeting here in Oxford today. I could stand here and say more or less what other people are going to say about the effect of these 15-minute neighbourhoods, soon to become digital ID facial recognition zones. We are watching the beginnings of the Chinification of Europe in preparation of the social credit system. Please raise your hands if you are aware that we live under what is called the British Constitution. If you are aware of that, please raise your hands. Okay, you can put them down now. And again, raise your hands if you're aware that we live under what is called... No. Okay, and again, raise your hands if you understand the meaning of constitutional law. I'm going to be a lawyer when I grow up, so I need to know all this stuff. As I understand it, under constitutional law, it is we, that is you and me, the ordinary folk, the corner shop owner, the truck driver, the nurse, the doctor. It is we, the common people, who wield the power and authority. Is that not true? Am I wrong? No, I am not. Okay, so the officials in City Council have to do what we the people want. We the people are not slaves to these officials, and they are not our masters. Is that correct, or am I wrong? The MP, Andrew Bridgen, last month said that the politicians work for us, not the other way round. He said that as he was kicked out of government by the corrupt politicians who have hijacked our government buildings. I have no doubt that more than 50% of these politicians are secretly in favour of the World Economic Forum and their plans to enslave us in their digital nightmare. Starting with their digital ID system, which will give them total control over your bank accounts and whether or not you can access your money. Providing you are a good slave and allow yourself to be experimented on with their Frankenstein injections, I'm sure your money will be okay. Well, for as long as you live, anyways. I have no doubt about that. But if you dare try to stand up for your fundamental rights and freedoms, you will be punished. I have no doubt about that either. And the Oxford City officials are building this prison for themselves. How dumb is that? Yeah. of all that this idea will cut down on pollution. If, for example, you work a couple of zones away, you will now be expected to go out of town to a ring road, drive round the ring road and then come back into town. So how can it possibly be about pollution? Rather than cutting across the short way, a person now has to spend twice as much money on fuel and drive the long way round the city and cause twice as much pollution. And that will have a big negative impact on my carbon footprint tracker. So if I want to have good carbon score, it will mean stay home, don't go anywhere. You can see where this is heading, can't you? In a recent poll, it was claimed that 2/3 of the British people thought our government was corrupt. I think it's way, way more than 2/3. The greedy people have stolen our democracy and are now calling themselves politicians. And they have turned our democracy and our constitution into a tyranny. So what now? Some people ask me, how would you suggest we solve the problems of the world? And I ask, what problems? And they come out with a long list of things from homelessness to starvation, to wars, to energy crisis. And I have to stop them and say, look, the world has only got one single problem. If you deal with this one problem, all others will vanish. And they ask me, so what is it? And I tell them, you must deal with the greedy people. These greedy people are evil and are the one single cause of all the suffering on planet Earth. And until you deal with these evil, greedy people, things can and will only get much worse. The imposter, currently squatting in number 10, recently said that transparency was most important. And yet when asked about his £500 million investment in Moderna vaccines, he declined to answer. So clearly we live in a tyranny. It's very simple, really. In a democracy, the people know everything about the government. But Rishi Sunak has pointed out to us that it doesn't work like that anymore. The transparency he talks about is one of tyranny where they, the greedy people, know everything about us, but we know little about them. The greedy people have amassed personal fortunes which, because they are the greedy people, they keep to themselves. They have stolen the financial resources of the world from all the people to themselves. In my world, my utopia, the leader would be a champion of love and peace and would be hailed as a king, not for the type of blood in his body, but for what he did for the people of his country, i.e. increasing the wealth and quality of life and keeping peace with other nations. For us, the normies, the common folk, we the people, they would be our champions. For example, Rishi Sunak and wife have control of £370 billion. In my world, it would be a crime for any person to keep or have to themselves at their own personal disposal, personal access to such a vast amount of the world's money supply. It would be illegal. In my world, there would be no such thing as a billionaire. It would never be acceptable for one family to store or hoard vast amounts of personal wealth in offshore bank accounts. It would be a major crime to do so. Imagine it, all the problems in the UK, the homelessness, the hunger, the NHS, the energy crisis, all of the problems could be solved very quickly if Rishi Sunak recycled some of his fortune back to the people he took it from. So you tell me, who does he care for? Come on, shout your answers out.
It's donors!
I heard a couple of things actually, but two things. I heard two things there. Nobody and himself. Well, there you go. You've answered the question. It's not complicated. And he would still be a billionaire. These people are criminals in my book and definitely should not be in our government. And the people urgently need to right this wrong. My advice to the British people is do not trust this person to tell you the truth. He is a greedy person and only has his own selfish interests at heart. His pals at the World Economic Forum are quite openly calling us, we, the people, useless eaters and a waste of resources, adding they do not need the vast majority of us. They don't need us. Well, quite honestly, I think the whole of humanity would be much happier and much better off without them crazy lunatics. We don't need them, and we don't want them. As long as Klaus Schwab is free, no one is safe. Then there are the foolish people. These are the ones who are helping to build their own prison and the prisons that their children will have to spend their whole lives within, being watched as digital slaves and tracked 24 hours, every second of their life where privacy will soon become incomprehensible. I'm speaking about those well-paid officials at Oxford City Council who think they have the right to force their madness on the rest of us. And then there's the destruction of local small businesses. Businesses that depend on the free flow of traffic and the freedom of the people to move around and go about their lives freely as they choose, in order for that small business to survive. I could talk about the ignorance of these investors in the creation of these prison systems. Large corporations such as Lloyd's Bank and organisations who are acting in shameful and ungodly ways through ignorance and through corruption. Organisations such as the Church of England, who I am sure would have no part in this if they knew where it was all leading. Again, we see the blind leading the blind. All I can think of saying is, oh my God. Do any of you know what is fast approaching? Let's say my friend lives in Zone 3 and I'm in Zone 1. If, for example, I went to my friend's house in Zone 3, my parents normally come and pick me up in their car. It only takes 10 minutes. So does that mean that they would have to go round the ring road and back into town again? If my mum or dad had to drive round the ring road, it would take 30 minutes, causing much more pollution and leaving a much bigger carbon footprint. They will say, you can walk home. Would that be safe for me to walk home? Me as a 12-year-old walking home in the dark alone. Is that really going to be safe? Then they will say, oh, don't worry about that. We've already thought of that. You'll be safe. We will have 1,000 cameras on the streets following you and tracking you all the way home. Oh, and just remember, it's for your safety. What? Are you serious? Do you really think I want to be watched every second of the day? Are you serious? Thousands of cameras tracking my every move until I get home. At this point, I have to ask, is my safety that important to me that I want to be followed by cameras all the way home? Or do I prefer to have freedom than privacy? And also, for your information, I still wouldn't feel safe. No amount of cameras is going to stop someone who wants to attack me. I want to be safe, but not to the extent that I'm prepared to give up my freedom and my privacy to have it. Anyone who gives up their freedom for safety deserves neither. As a 12-year-old, I am really concerned about my future. And to Klaus Schwab, I say this. How dare you? How dare you steal my childhood and my future? And the future of all children by enslaving us in your crazy digital surveillance prison. We all know where this is leading. And by the way, Klaus, just for information, I still think you're a complete nutcase. How dare you? Who do you think you are? To me, you are no different from a villain in a James Bond movie, attempting to hold the world hostage in your crazy transhumanist dystopia. And for what? To make more money? More profit? Is there truly any amount of wealth that will satisfy your greed? So people, listen. Make no mistake. These are the first steps of a dystopian reality called 15-minute neighbourhoods. From a small seed, a huge tree can grow. Do you know yesterday the temperature was 7 degrees, but today it is 12 degrees. The greedy people are claiming that the zones are to do with climate change. Over the last few decades, the greedy people have managed to convince the people of the world that if the temperature goes up by 1 single degree, 1 degree, that all life will become extinct. How dumb have you got to be to believe that? This is not true. It's fake science. The same fake science that told us if we wear a cheap and pathetic face mask, it will stop us breathing in a virus. Climate change is nothing but a story created by fake scientists and the greedy people. and there is not a shred of truth in any of it. Recycling our waste is a good idea to save our resources and materials and to cut down on waste, but it has absolutely nothing to do with saving the planet. Climate change is being used to control us, to nudge us in the direction the greedy people want us to go. The truth is that the greedy people want total control over everything we do, everything we think, and everything we say. And they intend to achieve it by convincing everyone that climate change is a real danger, when actually, there is no truth in that statement whatsoever. The truth has been turned upside down. Can you people understand why I am so concerned? You must deal with the greedy people and demand our constitution back. Southend Council have blocked the 15-minute nightmares. Now we just need the Mayor of Oxford to grow a backbone and do the same. In the meantime, I would advise the residents of Oxford demand an independent investigation into how the city officials got the figures, claiming that most people were in favour of these infringements on your rights to travel freely. You must demand an investigation. That will stop their plans in their plan in its tracks whilst an investigation is carried out. So, before you go home muttering amongst yourselves about the craziest, smallest conspiracy theorist you've ever seen, understand this truth. We no longer have a democratic government in the UK. Our government has been hijacked by greedy and selfish imposters posing as politicians. They believe they are better than us and masters over us. And until this problem is effectively dealt with, the tyranny will continue. Thank you.
Can we make some noise for Jasmine, please? I know this is a very, very serious topic, but I think she should consider a career in stand-up comedy. And hands up if you had trouble parking and travelling around Oxford today. Hands up if you nearly got hit by one of the million cyclists that you saw. Yeah. Just a quick note as well, I know there's music playing. I know we haven't got the best speakers in the world, guys, and by that I don't mean the people, I mean the PA system. Now, obviously, if we had more money, we could get more speakers, but we've got what we've got, and we're doing this for a reason. So if we can, if anyone's close to a speaker that's got music on, maybe tell them to turn it down a bit out of respect for the people that have taken the time to come here today. Now, the next man, and we know that this is not about science. They're not doing this for scientific reasons or for climate change. It's all about control. And we do have an expert here with us today, a climate change expert, who's made a mathematical model of climate change over the last 50 years. Now, this man is absolutely amazing, and he will tell you what the real science is and why this is so unnecessary. Please give a massive round of applause to Paul Burgess.
Hi everyone. I have a website, I have a channel on YouTube called Climate Realism by Paul Burgess. I don't make a cent from it. In fact, it costs me money, right? Can you hear? Okay. Okay, I'm going to have to shout a bit. Is that better? Right. I have a YouTube channel called Climate Realism by Paul Burgess. That is I don't make a cent out of it. In fact, I subsidize it all. And that is where you can go and get the real detail behind what I'm going to say today. But what I'm going to say is this, and I've been involved in this, I'm 78 now. And by qualification, it's my grandkids to do this. I make lots of videos exposing the false science. And the most fundamental thing I want you to take away is this carbon footprints nonsense. Carbon is actually good. More carbon, more CO2 is actually good. You know, and today, all these conferences, all these COP meetings make no difference at all. If you plot the growth of carbon by the graph that everybody agrees on, there is no change when you have a COP meeting. All these $1 trillion spent on it achieve nothing. Today, we are producing more CO2 than ever before. So why are all these politicians pretending that we're reducing carbon? We're not, but I want to see more of it. Now I'm going to give you an example of some science. 32 scientists in 12 countries with 24 institutions involved. They made a study of NASA data, satellite data of the Earth. And they did it over 30 years. And vegetation on Earth grew by 14%. That's the same as 2 USA land masses going from nothing on them to full of vegetation. And they said 2/3 of that was caused by CO2. That's the sort of benefit. It's why we put CO2 into greenhouses. So the whole basis, the whole bedrock of climate alarmism is wrong. Absolutely wrong. And today, look it up. Look it up on World of Data. Look it up on Google. We have record crops in Africa, record crops in the Far East, record rice crops, record all sorts of crops. And that's because of CO2, right? So more CO2 is good. It also does something else. We have been through a CO2 famine just pre-industrial revolution when the CO2 level was really low. The plants were gasping for it. They couldn't grow properly. We had starvation. In that world they want to go back to, we lived really in a peasant community, starving. And what happens when you give a plant more CO2 is it needs less water. So that's why the German scientists did a study on the Sahara Desert and found it decreasing in size, not increasing. All the evidence is there for you. Right, let me give some examples now. I used to be in charge of Wales, planning water resources and things. I built a model in the 1970s, which really interested me. It was based on really trying to understand the river flows in a rain-fed river system. And in that model, I discovered the solar sun cycle, the 11-year sun cycle. That sparked my interest 50 years ago. Now, if I take droughts, we are now getting less extreme weather than in history, than in our short-term over a few hundred years. It's less extreme. The biggest drought in UK was 1775. Nothing has come near it since. What's the next biggest drought? 1798. This is the world they want to go back to. What's the next biggest drought? 1808, then 1854, 1887, 1890, 1921. I've just read out the top 5 droughts, the top worst droughts in British history. And it's the same for floods. They go on about the Pakistan floods, but look at history. And by the way, Pakistan has reduced its forests so much, it's down by, I think, about 90%. Because when you've got poverty, people chop down wood. People chop down the wood to get the energy. And that causes floods. But the floods in the past were worse. Forest fires, here's a good one. You may have heard of a bloke called Biden. He came into power. And he didn't like the record on forest fires. Because it's only 20% in America now what it was in the past. In 1920s and 30s, it was 5 times higher. And this data was on the public government NOAA website. So when he came into power, do you know what he did? He deleted the data prior to it. He just deleted the data. You'd have to be a nutter to accept that. They actually hide it. Hurricanes are less. Tornadoes are well down. And let's go on about Antarctica. You hear the stories about a high temperature in Antarctica. By the way, it's true. From South America, you can get a little blast of wind, as it were, that brings some hot air to the peninsula. Antarctica is now the coldest it's ever been on record. Check that online. It's the coldest it's ever been. And actually, funny enough, more CO2 cools Antarctica. But, you know, that is a fact. And that was also established by satellite and by terrestrial observation by a group of scientists in the EU. And I quote all these on my website. My YouTube channel is designed to give you videos that link the science that anyone can understand. And one of the best compliments I had was my 11-year-old son understood it and said, hey, that's not what I'm taught at school. And the real sin is teaching children at school this absolute rubbish. because for the last 30 years, there's been a mass brainwashing movement of children. Right? Well, let's go on about drowned islands. None of them have drowned. 90% of them have grown. 8% growth overall. Tuvalu, or Tuvalu, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, the most prone island in the world, the one they featured. This is going to go first, has grown 2.9%. But it doesn't stop their leaders sitting in a pool of water on chairs saying, help us, give us money. That's what the whole of the IPCC is about. It's controlled by third world countries. They even write the scientific report at the end that goes to all the politicians, called a summary for policymakers. I do a video on that. On the coral in the world. The Great Barrier Reef is now the record healthiest it's ever been in history, that we, in recorded history. And coral around the world, 80% of it is healthier than it's ever been. That's a recent report. Power generation. Now, what they're doing today is signing contracts with wind and solar to bake in high energy costs for you. I'll give you something now you can check. They'll say this wind farm can do 10,000 houses, or this solar farm can do 5,000 houses. It's not true. And they say they use off-gem figures. That's true. But the off-gem figure has 2.9 of it, or 20% say is electricity, 80% is gas. So in other words, they can claim they can do 5,000 houses, providing those houses are 80% of the energy supplied by gas that they're trying to do away with. And this applies, I can promise you, I've got a video on it, this applies to every single claim, every single wind farm, and anyone can see through it. So I went to develop one this was a solar farm. I went to the development meeting, and I said, how much power did you produce? They couldn't answer me. They couldn't even get the units of power right. Right, that's how bad this is. So we're now paying sometimes wind farms 50% of the time not to turn on. We have to pay them not to give us the power. Why? Because overnight the demand is low and the wind blows, the contractors still got to buy it. So we can't buy it. We haven't got to use it. You have to keep the grid in balance. And so what happens is we have to give it away, or we have to pay people to take it. We pay Belgium to take the energy from us. Three wind farms in Scotland studied by MPs. 50% of the time they were paid not to give us power. 50%. If Ed Miliband, the next Labour government comes in, has their way, they want to treble the wind farms. That's going to mean that most of the time, all the energy from wind farms is going to pay, even if they don't turn on. Because we're going to have so much overnight energy we can't store. And I've done a video on this. No one's doing the maths. I could go into detail. Then, as a cheaper way of getting around this, they're saying, let's pay you not to take the energy between 4 and 6. Up to 10 times the price. It's 33 pence a kilowatt hour for me now, and they've offered me £4. Right? That is cheaper. I'll tell you why. Because when the solar farm gets paid, it doesn't get paid solar farm price or wind farm price. It gets paid the highest price on gas that day. And you know, we've gone 50 times the normal price. So everyone gets paid a super high price. It's an absolute con. And these are all being baked in now. The Welsh government on that solar farm, so I'm now coming to the next point, green. I have been an environmentalist all my life. At the age of 11, I gave pocket money to try and clean up our rivers. I've been involved in that at the highest levels. I was in head office of Wales. I was the 11th employee of the Welsh Water Authority at the time. And I, looked into the droughts, I looked into this, I had to design reservoirs, everything. That was my job. And they don't today bother when it's green. When it comes to green, the solar farm in Wales now they're proposing is on a 53-acre site with badgers, with an ancient forest, with 11 species of bats. I didn't even know there were that many. And when I asked the developers where's the environment report, there's none. The Welsh government said, you don't need one. You try and get a house built without a bat survey or something. No chance at all. No chance at all. But you can get the green. If it's green, it trashes the environment very often. But they don't understand that. wind farms in Germany, a study, 200,000 bats killed a year. 200,000 bats a year. 3,500 tons of flying insects. Birds. Many, many birds, especially birds of prey. So I could go on forever about all this. But it's on my YouTube. It's on my YouTube channel in detail if anyone wants to follow. Now, I have tried to have debates with leading professors. In fact, Professor who was the best-selling book at the time on Amazon on climate change, only to discover they have no understanding of the data. I was absolutely shattered about the lack of understanding. I have tried to debate Extinction Rebellion. I've had 2 confrontations with them, nice debates. In the first one, they ended up saying, Paul, you're wrong, when the wind doesn't blow, we use gas. So I had Extinction Rebellion supporting gas. In the second one, they said, oh, we can use a new coal method where we can bring in coal power very quickly. So I had Extinction Rebellion supporting coal. That's how mad this world is. Everyone runs away from debate with me. That's my problem. And when you see my YouTube channel, you'll understand why. And the biggest thing for my YouTube channel is to show it to kids, because it's designed for anyone. It really is. But it backs everything I say up with science and evidence. My dream would be to debate, and if the BBC's here, try this. My dream is to debate Ed Miliband on BBC, because he's likely to be in a Labour government, the one controlling all this madness. That's my dream, and there's a challenge. Of course, they won't do that, because the law of the land is, when it comes to climate change, this is the law of the land. You are allowed not to give an even balance of argument when it comes to climate change. You can only present one side. That is a law introduced by Blair into legislation, right? They have decided what the science was 20 years ago. They decided it, and that's not the scientist. And if you argue, like the poor professor who pointed out that the coral reef in Australia, the Great Barrier Reef, was the healthiest it's ever been, if you do that, you get sacked. There is now a complete industry of tens of thousands of people, tens of thousands of scientists, whose mortgages depend on this alarmism carrying on. It's not true. And I'm willing to debate anybody, full stop. So bring it on, bring it on. I'll debate them, and I'll debate them in public, right? Thank you.
I just want to say, guys, that we're obviously not fans of the mainstream media, right? No. We've got Panorama, BBC's Panorama just here. Can we give them a big boo? We've got ITV. Can we give them a big boo? And we've also got another reporter from the BBC, and we give them a big boo. The biggest boo for the BBC. Thank you very much. I'm just asking the Panorama guy, are you sure you want to come backstage? Thank you. Bullshit Corporation, that's where you are. Anyway, guys, we'll crack on. We've only got 3 more speakers, very, very brief. And then we're going to get marching to make some noise. And then Panorama can probably come out with a massive hit piece of half an hour. Bullshit on the BBC again. Anyway, our next speaker, you'll know, he's been with us in the freedom movement, as we call it, the United Peaceful Freedom Movement. And since 2010, he went through what he calls his conscious awakening. And a lot of us have been through that. This guy's a DJ. He's been fighting with us, talking with us, and fighting for our civil liberties and human rights now for the last 3 years. Mark Devlin.
There's a reason why certain phrases have entered into common parlance. And one of them, which we'll all be familiar with, is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Yeah. It's actually the emblem for the Fabian Society, denoting the slow creep of Fabian socialism or cultural Marxism into society. But wolf in sheep's clothing also describes what is proposed for Oxford. And today is a very important day. History is watching, because it's Oxford today and it's everybody else's town and city tomorrow if what is proposed here is allowed to succeed. So a wolf in sheep's clothing describes something which appears innocent and harmless on the surface in how it's presented, but is actually deeply malevolent and harmful when you strip away the service. That describes what's going on here, right? We can see that what is being proposed for Oxford is nothing about worthy, noble causes such as protecting the environment, zero carbon emissions, sustainable development, and all these other appeals to emotion with which it's been presented. These are tactics, psychological weaponry employed by the advertising industry and perfected by Edward Bernays, the master of propaganda and public relations. That's how this is being presented. We know better. We know, as we've heard from many of the speakers, and Jasmine summed it up brilliantly, that this is just a stepping stone towards the New World Order nightmare future that the psychopaths have lined up for us. But they're not going to succeed. Right? There's a reason why Oxford has been chosen as the blueprint for all of this. I know a thing or two about this city. I was born here. I grew up in the area. Used to work on Fox FM, for anyone that remembers that, back in the day. DJ'd at the Park End Club. But more recently, I've worked as a private hire driver up until COVID. And I used to have in the back of the car people like big pharma executives, lecturers and professors from the university. And I would hear some of the conversations that went on in the back of the car. Oxford has been selected because it's perceived as a place which is very system-minded, where people listen to establishment sources. But I would suggest that they've made a tactical error with this one, and that they've overreached. And the great turnout we see here today is indicative of that. When the reality of what these 15-minute cities really are going to mean for people in their regular daily lives hits home and the penny drops, there is going to be massive resistance to the attempted theft of our rights and freedoms. In George Orwell's 1984, which seems like a fitting story, the character O'Brien says to Winston Smith, "If you want a vision of the future, Winston, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever." I say to hell with that vision of the future. I have two potential visions of the future myself. In one, we're all standing around in a Soviet Cold War era gulag in the exercise yard, looking at each other, scratching our heads, saying, how the hell did we end up here? In the other vision of the future, the one which I prefer, at some point, we're all sitting with our grandchildren on our knee, and they're saying to us, "Granddad, Grandma, what were you doing in the early 2020s when the psychopaths attempted to take away our future and plunge us into this New World Order nightmare?" And we can look them in the eye and we can say, "Sweetheart, I was doing everything I could with every fiber of my being to resist it." And you know what? We put it down. Our generation put down this threat. I want to be able to say that, and I believe we all will. We need to say that we saw what was coming, and we said, "You want to do what? Not on our watch. Not on our watch. The answer is no. Thank you.
I know I've already done it once, but BBC. Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
All right, look, I jest. I think you're all right. You're a cameraman. I'm trying to cover myself now. We are peaceful, but shame on you. No, seriously, guys. We know it. But you're laughing. He's laughing, everyone. He's probably... You know that we're telling the truth, and you know that we're on the right side of history, BBC. So as long as you report the truth, then we're all right with you. Anyway, our next speaker, most of you are going to know as well. This guy, he's pretty much an expert in leadership and human potential. This guy's been with us from the very beginning as well. He's been talking to you, he does a podcast, he's been speaking the truth, and he's done an awful lot for the freedom movement, human rights and civil liberties. So please make some noise for Dan Aston Gregory.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Great to see so many people here. Now, I'm guessing you people at the front have already made up your mind that this is a really bad idea to introduce these schemes. Am I right? Great. So I want to speak to the people who have come here out of curiosity today to find out what's going on. Because the reality is, our dear friends at the BBC and others aren't really speaking about this at all. But this is a global rollout of a scheme called the 15-minute cities. And when people say that, you know, the press, like the BBC, will say, oh, it's a grand, the conspiracy theorists are saying it's a grand conspiracy. Well, if you look at it, it's an open conspiracy because you've got organizations like the C40 and the Global Covenant of Mayors who've all signed up to the idea that we do these 15-minute cities. And in the UK, already 100+ councils have said, yes, we're going to do what Oxford are doing and others before them. And with everything that's been spoken here today, there's always an emotional plea to some utopian ideal. And I can understand it. I can understand the appeal of a green city with, you know, lots of beautiful areas for our children to play in. Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't actually want to live in an area where there's lots of great amenities nearby? We all want that kind of thing. So where are the checkbooks at the local councils in terms of investing in beautifying the area, investing in industry, investing in local jobs? You would expect a 15-minute scheme which promises these wonderful ideals of everything you need within 15 minutes of your doorstep to actually be out there actively building and investing in your local community. But how many people know a local or national government that is spending their money wisely at the moment? You know, this is a left-leaning city, I know that. And again, the media will say, oh, the right-wingers came here today. I've been politically homeless all of my life. There's things on the left I like, there's things on the right I like, there's things on the left I'm appalled by, and there's things on the right I'm appalled by. But the reality, no wonder why you're politically homeless with the state of affairs we find ourselves in here today. But the governments are needlessly spending our money on war and, you know, cronyism and all the things that has been billions have been spent through the last 3 years on COVID, leaving us in quite a precarious situation. So no, we're not facing a beautiful 15-minute city where everything is wonderfully available on your local doorsteps, wonderful education for your children, beautiful parks, wonderful amenities, lovely restaurants. If that was really what was on offer, you would see people's legs matching their mouths and taking action to actually build vibrant communities. And I'm sure we'd all agree with that ideal. That's the promise. But like every con man, it's a missale. We're being missold. Because what's on offer, rather than this beautiful, lovely, vibrant environment on your doorstep, is surveillance, Car CCTV, watching your every move, blockade, stopping you moving around the city, and completely removing your ability to travel freely. And the reality is that within every utopian ideal, there has to be realism and practical reality. There has to be pragmatism. You know, if you're a major employer in Oxford, how are your employers going to get to you if you're only able to get within 15 minutes of your city? Now, of course, there's exemptions. Right, okay. All this language we're getting used to for your own safety, exemptions. It's all become normalized in this new normal. Who accepts the new normal, by the way? No! I think it's time that we define a brighter future for ourselves. It's time for us to take the power back and say, actually, we do want vibrant, beautiful, lovely communities on our doorstep. But who's going to build them? If we wait for the government, we'll be waiting the rest of our lives. It's down to you and I. It's down to each one of us to say, actually, I'm going to take personal responsibility in this decade, and I'm going to make a difference in my community. I'm going to lock arms at people next to me, left and right. I don't care where they lean politically, but I'm going to make a decision to actually make a beautiful community. And we're going to say no to the state powers that are trying to intervene and micromanage every single detail of our lives. Yes. There's a great paternalism about the government. They think they're your parents. The reality is that we're adults. We don't need other parents. We don't need more parents. And the hard thing is this. I grew up, I'm 39 years old. I turned 40 this year. I grew up in the days of analog television. Who can remember analog television? And then it started to get a little bit digital when I was a child. And there was this parental control setting, which would prevent you as a child from seeing things that were unacceptable to see. Now, my parents never switched that on because they simply taught me. They taught me a lesson about what's acceptable for a young child to consume. They taught me to understand principles and values, and therefore they enabled me to make my own decisions. They could have just switched it off so I couldn't ever learn for myself, and that's the kind of world that we're living in right now, is that people want to shut you down and take control. What kind of lesson are we sending to our children if that's the way we live? Why don't we empower people and nurture people to actually make a difference in our community rather than shutting us down and stopping our movement and preventing us from living our lives? And I agree with everything that's been said here today. Thank you. We must stop it at its roots. This is a cause set in motion. It's already happening. And the resistance is building, but they're acting fast and they've got a lot more money and power than we have. But we've got people power. We've got people power. And when we come out in numbers and we have the courage to share the stories with one another and speak our true voice, because you know what, we've been suppressed for so long, we're slammed the media. The minute we say anything that goes against the narrative, you're slammed. It's time to have the courage to go beyond that. Regardless of what the media say about what happened here today, we know what happened here today. We were here, we're living it, we're breathing it, and we're not afraid to challenge authority. But we are willing to challenge authority on the basis that we do want a brighter future. We do want that nice ideal. But we know that it's only going to happen if we take matters into our own hands. And that's why we're here today. Thank you very much.
The BBC guy's behind me now. I'm kind of glad he's moved. You're just going to get a shot on my bum. Anyway, guys, we've only got one more speaker, and you are going to be marching very, very soon. And as you do go towards that direction in which you'll be marching, can you please pick up some of the postcards we have, because they're from messages to the council. So in the last gazebo with the light papers and the flyers, you'll see some postcards for Oxford Council, if you can collect them and fill them in a bit later on. Now, our last speaker, everyone will know as well. Now, a group called Save Our Rights, woo, again, have been standing for our human rights and civil liberties since all of this started. And we know this is all connected and it's all about control. And Louise is going to tell you a bit about digital ID. And like we said, this is all about control. It is all connected. We are just the resistance. And this today is just a demonstration of mass non-compliance, peacefully, of course. But can everyone make some noise for Louise Cleffield of Save Our Rights?
Hi, everyone. Obviously, our primary focus here in Oxford today is to prevent the 15-minute cities with mandates. But what we have to be aware of is just how many avenues they are taking to exert control over us all. At the moment, they are actively trying to bring in digital IDs. Now, this is something that we've talked about for many years, but now it's on the government website. It's no longer a conspiracy, it's a fact. As is always the way, we're just usually a couple of years early. On the website, it states that they want not only your name, your date of birth, but your passport details, your driving license number, your transaction details, and your photographs. Now, when we've got a rise in ANPR cameras and facial recognition cameras, then that could ultimately pave the way for total control. Obviously, they're not saying that's what they're going to use it for at this point, but we have no accountability, no way to measure, no mechanisms to challenge them if they do. Because at the moment, we see in Birmingham, they've got fines for low emission zones. 30,000 people a month are not paying those fines. That is the power we need. Phenomenal effort of mass non-compliance in a peaceful, reasonable way. However, if they bring in digital IDs and they've got your transaction details and they can restrict your benefits or they can restrict your pension, it's not going to be possible. They will just take that money straight from you. So all of these things are linked, and this is where we have to keep an eye on absolutely everything. We have to be constantly vigilant. At the moment, they are running a consultation. This consultation is designed on purpose to be exceptionally difficult. If you oppose digital IDs for the first two-thirds of the consultation, you want to strongly disagree. But then suddenly it all switches and you start needing to agree because they've worded it in a way to trip you up. However, we've created a guide to help people do it. I don't think it's worth all of you spending 4 hours each trying to figure it out, because that's just a waste of a collective time. So I spent many hours creating a guide so that you could do it in about 5-10 minutes. But you must do it because they take your silence as consent. So you might think they don't listen, but they do. They listen to numbers. They don't listen to individual voices. It doesn't matter if you write the best argument. It doesn't matter if you write an essay about why it's so bad. What matters is numbers. It is always a numbers game. And today we have numbers. So that is the key. Take the 5 minutes. Be part of the numbers, keep up the pressure in all respects, because they do take silence as consent. I've made it really easy for you. You can find it on the Save Our Rights UK pages, and it is all part of the same agenda. It's all coming together, and if we want to resist tyranny, we've got to do it in every single way. So thank you for letting me share about that, but thank you so much for being here today. It's amazing. There's people as far as the eye can see, every direction. You're all heroes. So give yourselves a big round of applause.
Well, that's it, guys. Thank you so much. We're going to let the music play you out, but if you want to make your way, turn around in this direction. Now you're going to be making some noise and sending the message through Oxford. Thank you very much, guys.
Speak out the way while people are walking past.
Sorry,
I just thought I'm very low here. This could go very low.
Hello.